Hi everyone, what I have here is a rocket engine turbopump designer. A turbopump is the part that brings the propellants into the engine, into the combustion chamber eventually, so that they can combust and give us our thrust. So it's a very important part of the engine and finicky, and it is the cause of some of the limitations of our rocket engines. But I didn't really have a designer for one. It was on my to-do list, but for me to do it, I would have to learn all the equations and figure everything out. And actually, this is much more difficult than the combustion chamber design, the combustion chamber nozzle. Those I can write out the equations for and actually solve things. And I already have a program for that. That's Rocket Propulsion Analysis Lite, RPA Lite, which is the free version of RPA. But even RPA does not attempt to do the turbopumps. So that gives you an idea how hard it is. And one of the reasons it's hard is because it's sort of iterative in that you can't just straight up solve the thing. There's too many things that are dependent on each other in a web of influence. And as a result, you just sort of have to guess and check. So that's sort of painful. But what I have here is a designer that I asked Claude to make because I was not probably going to get around to this. I have other coding things that I need to do, like I'm trying to make games in Unity and stuff like that. So this was very low on the list. So people had told me that Claude AI is good at doing coding, and I wanted to test that out. I'm not super enthusiastic about AI, but I figure it's prudent to at least see what they're good at and what they're not. And this is one of those projects where I figured, okay, I can see whether it's good at this or not. So that's the plot here, if you will. And this is the result. And, this wasn't a one-off thing. I gave Claude the initial prompt, and then I asked it to refine it a bit because one of the benefits of giving an AI this project is, even though I don't know how to work the equations, I sure as heck know that the resulting numbers have to come out a certain way. And in particular, it's these numbers at the bottom that I'm most interested in. The total length of it, how much diameter there is, and what the mass of it is. These are things that I know what the ballpark correct answer is for. So we've got that, and then the rest of this is telling us what's okay and what's got a risk, right? It says that there's a risk here, and that's why it's in red. So that's good. But we're going to have to help it out. It can't just straight up solve everything, and we're going to have to do that guess and check stuff. So what we have here is a set of propellants. I've limited it to liquid oxygen, hydrogen, methane, and kerosene for now, though it's fairly easy to add your own. Somebody I had given this to already did add MH and NTO, I think, and stuff like that, or UDMH and NTO maybe. And then there's the shaft materials. Some of these are not cryogenic, so you have to worry about that. We do have kerosene here, so you could use it for that. Some of them are cryogenic, so that's okay. I'm going to use titanium. And then the mass flow rate. Once you've designed your combustion chamber in RPA, you should have that. You should know how much mass is going through per second for that engine. And then the pressure rise. This also you can get through RPA if you're using the demo version. And the pressure rise is between the tank and eventually what you need flowing through the engine. So the tank is usually at maybe 2 atmospheres or something like 2, 3, 4 atmospheres, something like that. And then the combustion chamber is like 100 times that often. So we could have it at 200 bar, which ends up being about 2,900 psi. I think in psi's myself. So that could be the combustion chamber. But beyond the combustion chamber pressure, you need the pressure to have it feed through the coolant tubes around the engine if you're using it to cool the engine. If we're not using liquid oxygen to cool the engine, we don't need too much extra to get it through all the tubes. But if you do use a propellant in order to cool the engine, then you're probably going to need an additional pressure rise on top of the combustion chamber of, let's say, 50% or something like that. So let's say we're going for 300 bar here overall. Probably we don't need too much of this stuff. And we see we have a cavitation risk here. And we need 229, it says. This is one of those calculations that we're going to have to figure out. and we only have 21.7. It says try raising the tank pressure, add subcooling, or use a more aggressive inducer or a boost pump stage. Now, we can also, it doesn't even mention that we can have a multi-stage input. So we can have 3 stages here, and then basically the margin that we need gets cut down by that factor. So it goes from needing 229 to 3. Now, one of the benefits of having the AI do this is I didn't know a lot of this stuff beforehand, and now this makes at least some of the math clearer to me. I would have had to have started from scratch, basically, trying to figure all this stuff out. I wouldn't even have known some of the terminology. I don't think it's getting everything right, but now I know some of the terms that go into the equations, and I'm more comfortable with how things are interacting with each other. So this whole idea that increasing the number of stages, it even has a little note here, more stages, lower tip speed per stage, lighter material stress, helpful. So it has little tool tips here. And then we have the inducer and cavitation. This is typical, and then there's an aggressive one. Like it said that we could use a more aggressive inducer. And then we could have subcooling. Subcooling increases this NPSH. And we can see the margin here. This is the cavitation. So this cavitation risk information is based on this stuff down here. And we could reduce the safety margin if you want to do that. That can get things closer. Or we could just increase the tank pressure. Or if if your pressure rise is sufficiently high, which in this case it's pretty high, you could also add a boost pump. The SSMEs, the Space Shuttle main engines, have a separate stage, a low pressure stage that increases the pressure somewhat and then passes it on to the high pressure stage, which does the rest. And so this boost pump is that low pressure stage. And you can see it very quickly has a positive effect if you really need the high pressures that something like the SSMEs do. So if you needed it to get to 600 bar, then probably you don't want to increase the tank pressure, because the tank pressure is going to make the tanks heavier. The more tank pressure you want, the heavier the tanks get. So rather than increase tank pressure and then having heavy tanks, it's much better just to have the boost pump and then get your feasibility like that. And so we have a boost pump. Actually, the boost pumps on the Space Shuttle main engines can boost it well above 30 bar. So that is helpful, as you can see. So no problems there. We get our RPM here, and you can see the flow rate. And one of the critical things that you would normally have to calculate is this head required and head achieved. Don't take the units literally. I mean, it's sort of like if you release the propellant, that's how high it would actually go if just released in midair, but fighting gravity. It's weird, but don't worry about the fact that this is 5.4 kilometers. That's a perfectly normal number for this value. But one of the constraints I told it to have so that we could actually calculate things is to set the head required to the head achieved. So it's constraining that so that we don't have to fiddle around with this and figure that out manually. Otherwise, we might have to, and that would be another variable in the mix here. But I've said, no, we're just going to say we're going to get what's required. And that's a limitation on this so that we can actually make the calculations. I mean, it's possible that a turbopump would get a higher amount than what we require, but we're not asking for that here. And then there's more fiddly bits like the span of the shaft. And so this is the bearing span. It changes that. It also has an effect on the RPM here, you can see, and then there is a margin. So if you have the span increased, then that stresses out the material a bit more. But it doesn't really hit the limits or anything like that. And then there's a stiffness multiplier if you really need more available RPM. So this is the available RPM, and this is the operating RPM. So it's not like we need anything like that. And then there's this flow coefficient. Right now it's set to locks. There's a RP1 flow coefficient, there's a conservative one, and then there's hydrogen. And then a number of blades. Changing the number of blades here improves your margin here, so it reduces the cavitation. Let's put this to more marginal amount. So if we were right at there, then increasing the number of blades would make it happy. But increasing the number of blades also makes this heavier. So decreasing the number of blades makes it lighter, and if you could get more out of your boost pump, that would be better. And then we have the blade angles in the impeller. So that's another thing that subtly changes things. And then you have your design. I mean, the design is basically, the length, the diameter, and, the pump section, the mass, and these numbers. And that's what it comes out to be. And you can have also, instead of an aggressive one, a super aggressive one. And the best thing to do is to see what real engines have, but it's tough with this inducer thing, and that's why I haven't tackled this problem before. S equals 9 matches real booster stage inducers like the SSME low pressure turbopump. So that super aggressive is done, even though it says it's super aggressive. And we could also change it to 2 stages. We still fulfill it. And 2 stages makes this all lighter, right? If you have 3 stages, it's 464. If you say 2 stages, it's 308. And can we go 1 stage? Not right now, but if we had a better booster pump, we could. If we really need this much pressure rise. So you have to figure out the mass flow rate and pressure rise from your chamber design, and then you can come here with this. Subcooling also helps the margin here. The cavitation risk is the main thing that could cause problems, so you might find if you fiddle around with this that other things cause problems too. It depends on what you're using. Like hydrogen, hydrogen now we've got a new thing going on. Required tip speed exceeds material limit. Okay, and so now we've got a structural problem. Okay, I've got a feasible design here with hydrogen, and that did require paying attention to the stress factor. But we've got titanium and 133 kilograms per second, but not as much pressure rise as I would like. Then we have more problem. We've got a high tip speed here. Well, so here it looks like the max I can do is 360 bar. Maybe if I pump up it still doesn't like the head requirement. I can get a little bit more out of. It doesn't like the disc stress, even if I increase the boost pump. So 360 bar there. And these are the numbers, 10 blades and all that business. But we can get a turbo pump like this. Now, should you be rushing and go design a engine with this? No, you definitely shouldn't. And yeah, this had taken a few iterations. In fact, there was an earlier version, so I actually started off. It isn't Claude that I was using. It was the free version. I haven't paid for these things. So it was Sonnet. It's Sonnet. It was originally Sonnet 4.5, but Sonnet 4.5 made a version that looked like this, which I sort of like better. I like a lighter UI myself. And so it was like this, but then they came out with Sonnet 4.6. And with Sonnet 4.6, I handed it this and asked it what was wrong with it. I had already gone through a few iterations with Sonnet 4.5, and after it saw this, it went, well, okay, I'll change it. And it changed the UI too. So it seems like Sonnet 4.6 has a preference for dark schemes rather than light schemes, which Sonnet 4.5 did. The script is just an HTML file, but it does access CSS styles from the web. So that is a thing that it does. You can take a look at the code because it's HTML. It's open source by default. And make sure it's not doing anything wacky. But yeah, I'll link the HTML file in the video description so you can mess around with it. I won't link the older one. It did have some faults in it that the newer version of Sonnet corrected, so I'll give you the latest one and we'll see what kind of improvements might follow. For those who are curious, my prompt was create a designer for rocket engine turbopumps. It should have a friendly user interface, allow for the selection of the following propellants, so I listed the 4. The user will input the mass flow rate, and the interface will allow the user to tweak any other necessary variables to accurately calculate the properties of the turbopump. And so it figured out what properties it would need and what it would adjust, and then I asked for HTML instead of JSX so that people could use it a little bit better. And then I started complaining. Is there a way to determine the overall dimensions? I wanted a PDF sheet with the equations used in the calculations, of course. And so it gave me that PDF. And then what materials are you using? Then I took the HTML file and I handed it to ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to critique it. And ChatGPT gave this critique here, which I then copied and pasted into here. I didn't tell Claude that it was coming from ChatGPT. I don't want them to get antsy about that whole thing. And then so it corrected those things, and then I went back and forth and continued to get corrections out of it. So it wasn't a simple process, but it's still the AI doing things, and eventually I'll look at it, look at the equations and figure out if anything else is going on that might be wrong. But for now, all I really wanted was something that would allow me to model a credible turbopump in Blender for a rocket engine. I just wanted a reasonable sized turbopump and a good idea of how heavy that turbopump would be. And so that being all I really wanted, I'm not really going to make a rocket engine here. I figured this was good enough. So for my purposes, this is good enough for now, but I do intend to figure things out more properly later once I have the time with all the other things that I intend to do. It is a matter of curiosity, but I'm thankful that at least the AI has given me some familiarity over these terms so that now I know what's interacting with what and what numbers to look out for. And eventually I'll refine this into something a little bit more useful, because there really isn't something like this hanging out anywhere. I think there is a Miko, I forget what it's called, Miko Rocket Engine Designer or something like that on Steam. Once it goes on sale, I'll get that and see what that's all about. But I don't know if it can do everything that I want it to do, but then, you know, all I need really is the mass and the size of it, and that's good enough for me. So, yeah, there you go. A Rocket Engine Turbopump Designer. I'll link the HTML file in the video description. With that, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.